Hello and welcome. This is Angie with thecountrysheetcottage.net here today with another Cricut video. So today we're going to talk about the new debossing tip that is available with the Cricut Maker. So this tip actually goes in the quick swap housing. So if you have a scoring wheel, you already have the housing. So we're going to talk about how to add that deboss tip to your housing, what to do in Cricut Design Space to make those deboss lines, and then we're going to deboss a series of materials and see what each of them do with the deboss tip. And so you can kind of decide if you want to use the deboss tip for your project or one of the other new maker tools, which we'll have videos for soon, so stay tuned. So first let's start in Cricut Design Space and look at what you do to actually use that deboss tip. So let's talk about how to use the deboss tool itself in Cricut Design Space. So let's start with the score line. So when you add a score line, you can see that it's a score and uses either the scoring wheel or the scoring stylus. We can actually pull this drop down box down and we can click deboss. Now it says deboss underline type as well as on your layers panel. So this means that this line will now be a deboss line and ask for the deboss tip on the maker machine. Now you can do the same thing with other shapes. You can also do the same thing with images. So you can do the same thing with any shape as well as any image. So let's say we want to take this image that is a cut right now. We can change that to deboss. You can see that the lines were thick, so there's actually a debossed line on each side. And then we would actually need to put it on a square or something else of material. So we would put that together, attach it, and now when we click make it and go to that mat, we can see that the square will cut out of the material and then the bird and the flower will deboss. So now we're ready to start debossing some materials. So now let's take a closer look at the tips themselves and how to change them out in the housing. Now, when you're operating your Cricut machine, you might have a project that uses a deboss and then cuts it out, like say a card or something like that. It's going to ask you for each of the tools. So it's going to ask you for the deboss, and then it's going to stop after it's done debossing. It's going to tell you to change the tool and change to your cutting tool, like your fine point blade or whatever it is to cut your material. So it's going to do that hard work for you. All you have to do is stop and see what's on the screen while you're operating your machine. So let's take a closer look at that deboss tip. So let's talk a little about the deboss tip itself. So the deboss tip, if you can see that, will have a 21 on the end. It goes in the quick swap housing. So all you do is to press this plunger, remove, release the plunger, and then add it back on. Now this quick swap housing was originally for the scoring wheel. So the scoring wheel looks like this. There's two different tips, a single and a double, and you can interchangeably use either the scoring wheel or the deboss tip. So then you can interchangeably use either that scoring wheel or this deboss tip right with this quick swap housing. So you only need one housing and you can buy multiple tips for it, including the scoring wheel, the deboss. There is an engraving tip, there's a perforating wheel, there's a wavy wheel that all use the same housing, and you can just buy one housing. You can buy two if you would like. So here's an example of another tool. So this is actually the engraving tip. So I wanted to show you this just so you can see the difference. So I wanted to show you this because we're going to talk about how possibly some of the materials might work better with the engraving tip. You'll have to wait for another video on that. So this one is a deboss, and you can see how small it is in comparison with that engraving tip. So now that I've used the deboss, I'm really looking forward to using this engraving and seeing what all it can do. Now one more thing I wanted to mention. So while you're using your deboss tip, it'll say on the screen that the machine may stop and the tool may spin. That is completely normal. So it may freak you out a little bit, but it will stop and the tool itself will spin for a few seconds. It may seem like a long time, but it's actually part of the process, so don't worry about it. Just let it do its thing, let it finish its deboss, and then it'll prompt you for your next tool. So now let's get into debossing some materials. So the first thing we're going to look at is debossing just medium cardstock. So I'm just using a medium cardstock setting for these next few projects. So let's look at scoring wheel versus deboss tip, what the different settings do, and actually how that affects your deboss, so you'll be more knowledgeable when you start to use your deboss tip. The first thing you may be saying to yourself is, I already bought this scoring wheel, can't I just deboss with it? So the answer is yes and no. So the scoring wheel does deboss. So I deboss this butterfly into this cardstock with the scoring wheel itself. Now you may be able to see when you deboss with the scoring wheel, the lines go past where you intended them to go. And you may intend for it to stop, but the scoring wheel keeps rolling slightly past where you expected it to stop. Now, in comparison, right? So then I used, for the same project, I used the debossing tip instead. So this is with the debossing tip, same project, and you can see that these lines are crisp, stop where they're supposed to stop. There's no slight overlap in the lines. There's no areas where it went over and it wasn't supposed to. Like, it's perfect just as I intended the butterfly to be. So this is the difference between the scoring wheel and the deboss. Now, what is the difference between the two as far as depth? Okay, so as far as depth goes, so this side is scored with the scoring wheel. This side uses the deboss tip. So you can see perhaps a difference, but it's definitely noticeable in person. The deboss is definitely deeper and more pronounced than the score line. So that's going to be the difference between the deboss tip and the scoring wheel. So now that we've done these comparisons, so what's to prevent you from using a different material setting and your deboss tip to get an even deeper deboss, almost like an emboss on the other side? So what I tried, so these were all done with the medium cardstock setting because this is medium cardstock. So I used the same piece of medium cardstock and instead used the chipboard setting to run some experiments. So a thicker material setting with a thin material. And these are the score and deboss lines with the thicker chipboard setting. These are the score and deboss lines with the cardstock setting. They basically look exactly the same. I went ahead and scored the butterfly itself. I didn't cut it out. Again, it looks relatively the same as it did on the cardstock setting. So you cannot use a thicker material setting and expect to get a deeper deboss onto your material. And then I kind of wanted to flip this over and show you that it does show through to the back. You might be able to see it slightly, but it's definitely not embossed on the back of your material. So you cannot use this as an embossing tip on your paper. So it's definitely a deboss tip, not emboss. Next up is everyone's favorite foil paper. So let's take a closer look at how the foil paper looks when it has that gorgeous debossing on it. Alright, so what about other materials? So this is a foil cardstock, so you can see that shine. Here's the scoring wheel and the deboss tip. Again, I found that the deboss tip gave me a deeper and more pronounced line. And here's the gorgeous card that I made with that deboss tip. Now, one tip I wanted to say. So I'm going to have the cut file for this card, and you can find the link in the description for this video. So one tip is, you may not be able to tell it, but the back of this is fairly ugly. So I wanted to make this a card. So what you would want to do is cut and insert if you're going to make a card. So you would make an insert for that instead of leaving the white portion as the card itself, because it is a little ugly on the back and can get a little ugly with the deboss tip. So now let's go a little crazy. Let's try acetate and the deboss tip and see what happens. So next up, I wanted to push it to its limit, and yes, you can use the deboss tip on acetate. So the scoring wheel and the deboss tip will work on acetate, and I even scored the butterfly, and it's going to be hard to see. It's kind of hard to see in person, but those deboss lines are definitely there. So if you have a project that uses acetate and you want to do a deboss on it, and you definitely can, and it will work beautifully. And now let's go even thicker. So we're going to start with craft paper as we work our way up to going thicker and seeing what happens when you deboss thick materials with your debossing tip and your Cricut Maker. Next up is craft boards. We're getting a little thicker here. And again, comparison between deboss and score. Deboss is definitely the winner. And I went ahead and debossed a butterfly under this craft board just so you could see that. Again, gorgeous, gorgeous lines, all from that deboss tip. So now we're going to do a few super thick materials. First up is chipboard. So this would be a test for those super, super thick materials and how to use those with your Cricut Maker and the deboss tip. Alright, getting into even heavier materials. So this is chipboard. You're definitely going to want to use a strong grit mat and tape it down on all edges. So this is the score and this is the deboss. So deboss is definitely more pronounced. You can definitely see that on these thicker materials. A couple of tips and tricks. First of all, tape it down well all the way across the edge. However, do not put any tape anywhere that your deboss tip will go. So the tape itself can kind of clog up the deboss tip and it can get stuck when you're making your project. So that's just one tip when using this, but otherwise it works beautifully. And finally, last one, we have genuine leather. So let's take a closer look at what the debossing tip actually looks like on the leather so you can decide if this one is right for your debossed leather projects. The next step is the deboss tip on leather. So this is gonna be hard to see because it's hard to see in person. So the scoring wheel and the deboss tip, they leave a mark on leather. Now, you can't really feel it. It's more just kind of debossed just barely into the surface. You can see where I went ahead and did the butterfly on this side. Couple tips with leather. Be sure to tape it down well across the sides. It'll kind of start to bunch on you so you can see it kind of bunched up. This is real genuine leather, so the thick stuff. So it kind of starts to bunch up. If it bunches up too much and starts pulling off the mat, it will actually stop because the tool will be not moving. So you want to be sure to tape it down well and use like a new strong grip mat. Press it down really well with like your brayer before you get started. But again, this is like barely in here, barely visible. So I will be trying again with the engraving tip. So the deboss tip is recommended for leather, but the engraving tip is as well. So I'll be trying the same method with the engraving tip to see what kind of different effects we can get, and hopefully it'll be an even deeper engraving into the leather, so it'll be more useful for a variety of projects. So that's all about the deboss tip, but stay tuned. We've got the engraving tip coming up. We have the perforating tip, the wavy blade, all of the new tips that go with the Cricut Maker, and that quick swap housing we have coming up right here on our YouTube channel. So be sure to give us a thumbs up if you liked this video. Be sure to subscribe if you want to get notifications about when the other videos go live, because I know you want to see what that engraving tip does to that leather, because I want to see it as well. And you also want to head to our YouTube channel. There's tons of Cricut crafts and Cricut how-to videos and how to use Cricut Design Space. If you're confused about anything with your machine, be sure to head there. If you have any questions about the deboss tip or anything we've talked about today, please ask them in the comment section below. Have a material that you want us to test? Ask that in the comment section below as well. So we love to test materials and run them through the ringer. So you have something else that you'd love to see debossed or have a question about, ask that below, and I will try to get to those as soon as I can. So thank you all so much for joining me today, and I'll see you next week. Bye-bye.